Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to your class. And you're like, what are you doing here? I'm Blaine. I think we've met most of y'all. So I'm the informatics academic advisor, and I'm just filling in with the technology aspect, but Naomi is still here. oh, crap. That's me. All right. So technology is obviously with us.
Can people hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to the informatics students who have kindly joined us today to talk about their experiences with academic research and study abroad. I think I gave all the panelists a heads up, but I am recording this session because sometimes there are students who have to miss a class, but y'all have such valuable things that I think our students can learn from. So let me just do a quick introduction of the 4 student panelists today. We have Harky, Tanner, Liam, and Madison. I think a few of them you might have met before, either through this class or in a previous setting. If we could have all 4 of you do some brief introductions, you can share whatever you would like, but the email response that you gave to me, I will be displaying on the screen behind you. So you don't have to repeat that if you don't want to, but if you want to emphasize something, oh shoot, it's not showing. Hold on, let me try again. But if you want to emphasize something, you're welcome to. So let's start with Madison. Oops, uh-oh.
I can talk while you're trying to figure this out too.
Yes, please. I don't want my giant face on the screen.
Yeah. So, hi, my name's Madison. I'm a senior in informatics right now. I'm graduating this spring. I was also a direct admit back in the second class of direct admits back in 2016. So I know a little bit of what you guys are going through when it comes to that. And I studied abroad 2 years ago. I did a fall quarter program in Spain. It was a communications program in a small town called León. UW has a study abroad center there. They have their own classrooms that their own teachers go to teach from. So there's a ton of study abroad programs that go there. For context, León is about the population size of Pullman. It's a really small town, but you can like walk from one side to the next in like half an hour. So it's really densely populated, so it doesn't feel like it's that small of a town. And it was a really cool time. I'm sure you'll hear more about it today. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Madison. Tanner, can you also do an introduction?
Yes. My name is Tanner. I am a sophomore in the Ivy School of Informatics, and I'm also in the business school. I do entrepreneurship. I've been on 3 study abroads through UW so far. I did one through the iSchool specifically, and then another one through the honors program, and one through the business school. And I also did undergraduate research through UW, but before I came here, so I was a high school student when I did the research. But I know a little bit about what the undergrad research looks like, not specifically in the informatics school, but what it looks like in the science departments. That's about it.
Wow, you've done 3 study abroad programs already? That's amazing. Harky, do you want to expand upon your sentence?
Hi, I'm Harky. I was here a few weeks ago, as most of you know, so hey, I'm back. I haven't done study abroad, but I've done academic research in 2 departments. One, I've been doing academic research in high school and in the iSchool, and I did it in HCDE as well. I'm also a sophomore, also a direct admit from last year. And I'm also a peer advisor, Blaine can confirm. So if you guys have any other questions, you can do my peer advising hours, because some students don't come into my shift and I'm lonely. So yeah, you can attest. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And Liam?
Hello, my name is Liam. I'm a senior here in the iSchool. I'm also a major in political science. I haven't done any study abroad, but I've done like a good amount of research. My first research experience, I don't think I put it up there, but it was actually in the Evans School of Public Policy. I did that for about 6 months from December of last year to June of this year. And then now I'm working in the Design Use Build Lab, which is a joint collaboration between the iSchool, CSE, and HCDE. Yeah, so I'm in 2 right now.
That's awesome. Y'all have done such interesting things already. It's I think it really invites a lot of questions from the students in the room. As with any of these classes, I always ask the students to submit questions in advance of the session, and generally there tends to be some pattern in the kind of questions that students submit. So here are a few that I heard a few repeated throughout the 20-person class. So they're behind you. Some questions about like, how do I get started? Or what are the benefits of doing research or study abroad? I'm gonna just leave this here and let any of the 4 panelists chime in any way that you would like. I am gonna just give a disclaimer that my facilitation when I'm not in the room will be a little more difficult than when I am in the room. So Blaine, if you could let me know if there are like any hands or folks in the room who are shy to raise their hand but secretly have a question, I will try to pause here and there so that we could include those. But yeah, let's start with the how do I get started question.
Okay, I'll start. So I actually got started in 2 ways in research. The first way at the Evans School was kind of a more traditional path where I basically looked on the work study job boards, was on there and found a role that I felt I would fit nicely with, and I applied to that. And then I met with the professor and was able to kind of like talk to her and connect with her and demonstrate that my interests academically were lined up with the project that she was working on. And they brought me on. And I think one of the key things for me getting that, especially for that in the Evans School, I was the only undergrad in the research group. So I think the reason I was able to make myself stand out was precisely because of informatics. 201, the R class was really useful in like doing policy analysis because it's good at like doing text analysis, histograms, stuff like graphical analysis. And I was able to kind of convey that to the professor and help her out with the project. And that's how I first got started with research. And then in iSchool research, I basically took Info 402, which is gender, information, and technology. And I looked into kind of the research topics that professor was working on. I presented her with a project idea for independent study, and she accepted that, and she sponsored me. I did independent study with her for 1 quarter, and then after that, she recommended me to another professor friend of hers who had just got funding for a very similar project to what I worked on, and I've been doing that ever since.
Wow, Liam, that's so cool that you've gotten involved with research in multiple levels and not just in the iSchool, but also in a very interdisciplinary area across campus as well. May I ask if like you did you come into the iSchool knowing you wanted to kind of like focus on academic research, or is this kind of something that you like stumbled upon and then ended up enjoying a little more than you thought?
I mean, yes and no. I knew I wanted to try it just because that's a pretty cool thing you get to experience, you know, when you're in college, is because there's no guarantee you'll get another opportunity to do research. So it's definitely something I at least wanted to try. I didn't know if that was going to be, you know, my career path or if that's something I wanted to do for like grad school, but I knew it was something I wanted to try, and then I just ended up, you know, keeping on with it, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
Great, thank you.
I can go next. So for study abroad, it really depends on what type of program you're looking at. I knew I really wanted to study abroad, and I wanted to study abroad in Europe because I have a friend who goes to school in Dublin actually, and I wanted to be able to go visit her at school. And I knew I wanted to do it at some point during my sophomore year, which is actually really young to do study abroad. All the people on my program, most of them were seniors, a couple of them were juniors, and then me and one other girl were sophomores. And funnily enough, we were also the people who had the most different majors than everyone else, because it was a communications program, so it was mostly like communications majors, poli-sci, psychology, stuff like that. Me and her, I was obviously an informatics major and she was a math major. So we both just kind of stumbled on it because we wanted to study abroad. I just looked at the UW study abroad directory, looked for programs that didn't have a language requirement because I didn't want to take language classes here in order to be able to study abroad. Found this program, applied for it. I got waitlisted for it originally. I had to go interview for it as well. I think a lot of the faculty-led programs require an interview. They're super chill. I really hate interviewing. It's one of the things I hate most in life, so I'm super nervous. And all the people who were in my interview got accepted for the program and later came to me and were like, why were you so nervous? It was study abroad. Who cares? And it was very unlike my personality. And then they have a bunch of information sessions, and there's also UW study abroad peer advisors. My friend who I studied abroad with is one of them right now. She was just telling me about the process. They're really good people to go to. They know all the study abroad, faculty-led study abroad options that are available. So if you really want to study abroad, go talk to them because they will be able to point you in the right direction. You can also, there's like Semester at Sea, there's other companies that do study abroad for college students. So you can also look at those. There's a study abroad fair that I think is coming up next week that will have all of those opportunities available too. And yeah.
I
Great.
would agree with Martha. Also, the application online is pretty extensive as far as essays go. So definitely don't wait till the last minute to start applying. And then again, the study abroad fairs are next year for the business school and I think for general. And those are really, really helpful to go to. You can meet the professors that lead them and the students that have been on them in the past to see what exactly the study abroads are like. And I would highly recommend them for engineering and STEM majors. Unless you go on a specific STEM or engineering study abroad, you're probably gonna lose the credits you need going towards your major. So summer study abroads are super helpful. That's what I've been on in the past and used to can still get, unless I went on an info study abroad, so I got info credits. But if you don't, you get business credits, and those might not go towards your major, but they could go towards your general requirements, or they might not go towards anything, but that's still a great experience. So something to keep in mind if you're aiming to graduate by a specific date.
Yeah, I think what thing Madison just pointed out was the study abroad fair, which is where all these program directors will be tabling and talking about general questions that you may have about study abroad if you're interested in different programs, which is Thursday, November 14th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the Hub Ballroom. And another part I just want to plug in really quickly is that I co-led a study abroad to Ghana in 2017. And so if you do have an interest in study abroad, I'd love to talk to you all about it more in detail.
November 14th?
Yes.
Wow, how opportune. Can we have the panelists speak a bit to the benefits of research or study abroad?
Okay, I'll start. So the benefits of research, I think, is twofold. First, just getting familiar with the process. So doing research, there's a lot of paperwork, especially if you do research with human subjects. There's NRIB paperwork you have to fill out, applications, for grants or funding, and then just internal documents that you have to circulate between everyone working on a project, and then documents you have to fill out if you want to submit your work to a conference or academic paper. So getting familiar with that whole process is definitely super useful, and it's very eye-opening for me because it is somewhat cumbersome. Yeah, that has been a really cool experience. And then also you get to learn really in depth about a singular topic. So right now I'm doing HCI research, and you get a lot of one-on-one time with professors who are at the top of their field, cutting edge, and you get to discuss with them and pick their brain and learn about new forms of visual communication, design, software development, and all that stuff. So that's been really cool and beneficial for me.
I can go next. So I'll combine the first and second question. So I took Info 360 last winter with Professor Jason Yeh, and the previous, so last year in the fall quarter, there's this whole research, iSchool research sort of event where like a bunch of professors who like wanted students to like come do research with them, were like presenting their research essentially. And Dr. Jason Yip was like towards the end, and I was just really bored because like there were a bunch of like MLIS professors, and I'm just like, I'm not saying I don't have anything against them. I'm just like, well, it was just a bunch of grad professors, if that makes sense. And so it was just like, okay, well, there's not really much like undergrad opportunity. And then Jason Yip comes up and he's like, okay, so this is kids team, and we do a bunch of research with kids and blah blah blah. And I thought it was really interesting, and so I didn't really like email him, but like I took a class winter quarter, and I was like, hey, so last quarter you like. And he's like, oh, that thing. And I was like, yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And so he like took me to his office hours and like told me everything. And then he was like, I don't have anything available now, but if you email me in like March, like towards like the end of the quarter, then I can maybe have you try Kids Team out. And basically what Kids Team is just like research with kids, like participatory design with kids. So you're like co-designing kids, you do a bunch of like activities with them, and it like sort of helps them to go to a bigger thing. Like yesterday we did like what kids think of in terms of Alexa knowing their identity or something, you know, like imagine if like, I'm gonna use you as an example, it'd be like, Alexa would be like, hey Rachel, aren't you supposed to go to soccer practice today or something? Like imagine if Alexa was telling you that. So that's what sort of we were discussing. So we do some Alexa work. I'm actually starting a project with him. I'll get into that in a minute, but essentially I emailed him and he was like, hey, try these sessions out. And I was like, in spring quarter. And so I went, and he was like, and I felt kind of like, because I was like, new. But like eventually he only gave me 4 sessions to come. And so I was at the 4th one, and he was like, so our end of the year party next week, do you want to join us? And I was like, sure. And so, yeah. And so that's like, so that's how I got involved in Kids Team. And then I was a part of the summer DRG as well. So a really big part of research is reading papers. And it's really useful in the fact that like you have to read papers for your classes, especially in info like related to obviously the topic that you're learning. So we literally had to read like 10 to 12 papers that summer. And we had like constant meetings, and it was just like it prepares you for like the actual like sessions as well, so that you know what you're doing. So I think like reading papers is really good. That's also something really useful. Like Liam said, with like documentation stuff. I haven't really done like all of that stuff, but definitely ethics is really huge. Like children are considered vulnerable subjects in research, and so you really have to be like careful in terms of like how like you get treated, and like how you can't like leave them alone with anything, even if it's as little as going to the bathroom or something. So stuff like that, that's also really useful. When is the best time? Anytime. It's never too late to do research. I started freshman year just because I wanted to try it. But yeah, that's basically, sorry, I just talked way too much. I'm gonna move it down that way now. So yeah.
Well, for me, the benefits of study abroad, I think, especially since you guys are all freshmen and you have so much time in informatics as a major, you have 4 years. You might as well explore other topics that interest you outside of informatics. And I would really encourage that just generally. So my study abroad was really useful because I got to learn things that I wasn't going to learn in the program, in informatics itself. And I just recently in my research method class, I've just started using some of the things I learned on that study abroad 2 years ago. Because one of my classes was we had to code newspaper articles to compare them between American and Spanish sources on certain current event topics. I think we were there when Barcelona was, and Catalonia was trying to declare independence. So we were also there in a really weird time in Spain. And it was probably the most dangerous it's been in Spain in a little bit. It wasn't that dangerous, but it was still like a lot of tensions. And we were like in the most Spanish part of Spain. If you think of like a European Spanish accent, like this was the type of Spanish they're speaking. And so that was one benefit, was to learn outside of my major. The other big one is just like learning different cultures and being able to explore. My program, we had a lot of time off and were allowed to go explore other parts. So I got parts of Europe, and even I went to Morocco for a couple days, which is a very different experience. And you really got to understand how these different cultures worked. I was in a homestay as well, so I was living with a Spanish woman. I had to deal with those communication barriers all the time because I didn't speak much Spanish. I took Spanish in middle school. So I really did not know much. I took French in high school, so that had some I could understand Spanish pretty well because they sound kind of similar and you can pick up on those cues, but I really could not speak any Spanish, except for like very basic. And she didn't speak any English. I think she was taking English classes while I was there at night. So she would one morning she came she opened my door and she was like, Madison, it's raining. And she was so proud that she could say that in English. And I was like, wow, it's raining, because we're also from Seattle. So it's like, rain, what a big deal, who cares? So it was just really nice to make all those connections. My city just randomly had a lot of people from around the world. We had some Kenyan people who were there. My Spanish class that I took was with the university in Leon and had a bunch of other study abroad students from other parts of the world. So I met a lot of Japanese students, some German students. So there was a girl from Australia in my class. So I got to meet a lot of different people and understand their cultures at a really deep level that you're not going to be able to do here in the States. So I think it's just really valuable for that.
Yeah, a lot of what Madison said, I didn't stay in a home from somebody in that country. I stayed with the UW students, so I never truly got to experience what it meant to be an exchange student. But I would agree, I went to university in Australia and there was exchange students from all over the world staying in Australia too, so having a deeper connection, and also the experience of living in a different country and not I feel when you're in America, you just know the American culture. I think that when you live in different cultures, people employers see that as a very valuable experience. I also, when I was in Vienna, I worked for Microsoft, so a lot of people are wow, Vienna, Microsoft's pretty cool. So highly recommend the iSchool study abroad. For our research, again, being able to go through that whole process from grant writing, coming up with hypothesis, decision making, all the way to publishing the paper, the fieldwork and such. That's highly valuable skills. Even if you're applying to be a software developer or whatnot, they still list that as qualifications as intensive research skills. So any study abroad experience or research experience is highly applicable to anything you apply to. It's a life experience that is kind of unique to you. And I would say as far as my experiences go, applying to internships and interviews, it gives you a topic to talk about beyond what everybody else has done. I've done software development or Microsoft, that's cool, but what else, the experience that you had that I could talk about that are unique and make you stand out from others.
Any questions so far from what we said? Yeah, go for it.
Did you apply to Microsoft and then or did you go to your study abroad and then happen to be working at Microsoft? How did that play out?
Everybody on the study abroad worked. Okay, we all worked for the Semantic Web Company. I was on a specific team that worked for Microsoft, and they designated who worked on what team. We never applied to Microsoft directly or anything, but we worked with Microsoft when we were in Vienna, so we got to go the Microsoft building or whatever. That's where we worked every day. But it was not you didn't apply to Microsoft separately. We just went to Vienna and showed up and said hi.
Blaine, as we hear more questions from the class, would you mind repeating the question just so I could hear it as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the class?
Come on, I know you're burning with questions about study abroad, research. What do you all think about? Are you all interested in? Is anyone interested in study abroad? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question for you. What university did you go to in Australia?
I'm gonna repeat the question. So this question is specific for Tanner. What specific university did you go work with in Australia?
I stayed at Queen's College, University of Melbourne, and also stayed at QUT in Brisbane. Did you have a specific college in mind?
No, I just have family in Australia.
Beautiful country. I loved it.
Well, if there aren't any more burning questions in the audience, we can return to the ones that we have on the slide, and then maybe come back in about 5-10 minutes just to see if there's any questions in the audience. I think the question that everyone is probably wondering is the second to last question, which essentially asks, how do you feel like your study abroad or your academic research experience impacted your career or your future or your professional interests? I just want to put the disclaimer that the panelists, you are not expected to know exactly what you want to do after you graduate, but I do think it sounds like these experiences were pretty formative for you. So we'd love to hear about how your professional interests maybe were adjusted or affirmed even through your experiences.
Okay, I'll start. So how important is research experience to employers later when applying for internships later in jobs? So I think the foremost importance of doing research in undergrad for later goals is probably for grad school, because how grad school works, specifically like PhD programs, is it's a lot of like interest-based. Can you propose a thesis to a professor at some university who wants to take you on and sponsor you? And that's kind of something I've learned being in the lab over the summer and hearing from some of the PhD students there and some of the visiting PhD students and professors. A lot of them got their start because of stuff they did in undergrad and people they were able to meet and connections they were able to make. So say they had a professor at undergrad who knew someone at Carnegie Mellon, they would get a reference to that professor and then they would, get into school there. And the old adage I heard a lot in the lab is like getting into grad school, specifically PhD programs, the GRE won't get you in, but it can keep you out, meaning that you really, like the GRE isn't too important. Like if you have a strong research background in undergrad, that is a huge boon for your academic career going forward. And I would say that's probably the foremost benefit. Secondary from that is, especially in the iSchool, you get a lot of experience doing technology research, but also writing. And that's very important for industry jobs like PM, where you have to understand strategy, design, research, and being able to synthesize all of that into documents, proposals, so on and so forth. So I have seen people from other universities who did research and people here who do research who went on to be PMs at tech companies, because they're able to say, I've done this research. It helps me, learn stakeholder analysis, user design, and then also writing that and communicating that in a really effective, concise way.
I can go next. So obviously it was a communication program. I learned how to communicate, both in a different language that's really uncomfortable for me. In Spanish, I was in intermediate level Spanish class, which was way outside of my comfort zone. I should not have been in that class. They should have dropped me a level, but I stuck with it. I made a lot of mistakes. I would speak French instead of Spanish in a Spanish class. That happened a lot. Very awkward, because my teacher would just look at me and be like, "That's French. Can you please repeat that in Spanish?" And then I had a lot of writing classes. That helps with writing. I'm looking to either go into user experience design or project management. Writing is going to be really helpful as a project manager. Or if I were to be writing documentation, also a really helpful skill. But I also think that, especially if you're trying to be a user experience designer, it's really helpful to see the world from a different perspective. Because your job as a user experience designer is, or a user experience researcher, either one, is to see the world from your user's perspective and then use that empathy to design products that are going to be helpful to them. But if you don't have exposure to other perspectives, if you're kind of stuck in your bubble, it's going to be a lot harder to find that empathy, especially for people who are very different from you. And any sort of research about other groups that you don't belong to, or study abroad, that's going to help widen your perspective and make that job a lot easier for you, and help you understand other perspectives in a much deeper level than you can just kind of reading articles online or kind of researching just from Google or Wikipedia or whatever you're going to do, or even social media, just finding people from other countries on social media. That's going to be a very different interaction than you're going to have with someone face to face in that country, in their familiar area and outside of your own comfort zone. So yeah.
I would agree with everything they say. Also, exposure, both in research and study abroad, you like discover so many things that you didn't know about previously, or like even career choices that you didn't even know exist, but are out there. And then for research and study abroad, again, like the relationships you get with faculty are a lot deeper than you would just going to normal school. And those are very, very valuable, especially like when you're going on into life and want advice and stuff. Having close faculty, right? You have super recommendations and such is very, very valuable.
Yeah, I would say these three summed it up fairly well. I went to Grace Hopper a few weeks ago, and because I do UX research with Kids Team, I did a little bit of research in HCDE as well. I was sort of able to tell and be like, and I was initially interested in just UX design, where because a lot of like info classes do really well for that, obviously, but when I told employers, I'm like, so they're like, so you're interested in UX, research or design? I'm like, both. And they're like, oh, well, okay, tell us about your research projects. And I just explain everything, and they're like, wow, okay, and then tell us about your design projects. I'm like, okay, here you go. So it's sort of like, for me, because I've sort of been exposed to both ends of things, that sort of the research sort of helps as well. Now, like for my 300 research methods class, who is actually taught by Jason Yip, which is good for me. My project is actually a project I'm working on with Jason as part of Kids Team. We're actually, it's on like the role of telepresence robots in participatory design and like with kids and like learning how to do like data analysis, obviously qualitative research, and all these other things are really, really useful when it comes to like doing research in the industry as well. And like Tanner said, like Jason is probably the professor I'm actually closest with in the high school, because I have like I've taken 2 classes with him and I do research with him, and like I said, like having that like relationship with the professor is honestly really, really cool and really, really valuable as well. So like, and like if I like hopefully like I would get the chance to like co-author a paper on this with him as well. So that would obviously, like Liam said, like grad schools would totally be like, oh my gosh, they have research experience. Especially if it's like a master's or a PhD program, especially PhD, just like he said, and you have that research experience already in undergrad, that's like really, really useful. And honestly, like if you're just like interested in research, but like don't even want to like, if you're not like sure about it, like with my HCDE thing, I just tried it out for like, I did this HCDE DRG for a quarter with like K-12 outreach with kids, and she even just try. You can do like a quarter-long DRG and just test it out, honestly. And if you don't like it, then you don't need to do it again. But I mean, if you just try it out for like a quarter and you can just see if you like it, you can like apply to a DRG or something, and that would also be like a really great way to like test out research, but also be like, okay, do I really want to like keep doing this? Or just like, oh no.
Thank you, Harky. Could I ask a question to the 4 panelists? When you think about like anything you've applied to in the past few years, like whether it's like a job, part-time, internship, or maybe you applied to some scholarship or further studies, can I get a show of hands of how many of the 4 of you have been asked for like a reference contact or like a recommendation letter? I see one hand from 2 hands, 3 hands, maybe 4 hands. Cool. So it's very common to be asked, sorry, I'm speaking to the class now. Thank you, the panelists, for answering my question. It's very common when you apply for a job, an internship, a scholarship, graduate school, to be asked for references or recommendation letters. And it's kind of like when you're applying to college, except it means a little more. So when you are asked for those things, you, of course, every candidate wants to provide a contact that can speak the most positively of you. But, you know, the ideal situation is not just someone who can speak positively of you, but also knows you quite well and can speak to your strengths, right? So I want to just reiterate what Harky said. Harky said that Harky works with Jason, the same professor, that she has taken multiple classes with him and has done research with him. So this prof probably knows Harky pretty well. Probably knows Harky's strengths and maybe knows a little bit of Harky's weaknesses or growth areas.
And he'll hide on the recommendation. He'll downplay that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so a professor like that knows you in multiple settings can give a really strong recommendation in ways that a professor who you've taken one class with and visited office hours once for, like, really cannot.
Yeah.
And it's like that for study abroad too, right? The prof that is leading that study abroad trip, like, they will get to know you.
Oh, yeah.
And it's great or not great.
Essentially, professors love to talk about themselves. Like,
Yeah.
everyone loves to talk about themselves. You just go to a professor's office hours and be like, what's your research? And they will ramble on.
It's their
Yeah.
research.
If you ask them about the research, they're just gonna ramble on for like 10 minutes. Like, I've done that before. Like, they will just, like, literally, like, they would be happy to talk to you about you.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, you know, the focus of today's session was about study abroad, academic research, and essentially just experiential learning that happens outside of a traditional classroom like this. Experiential learning is really valuable in all the ways that these panelists spoke to. But another way is that it really provides a more thorough way for you to get to know professors and for them to get to know you. And if it ends up being a good match, they might even be able to write a strong recommendation for you, whether you're applying for an internship, a job, graduate school scholarship, etc. So I thought it was great that Harky touched upon that. So I just want to reiterate another benefit of doing one of these things.
And also, some study abroad programs also ask for letters of recommendations from, they don't need to be a professor, but they do need to be someone who you have taken a class with at UW. So that can also be a TA. I use a TA for mine. So build those relationships with your professors. They're gonna come in handy somehow at some point. It's always helpful to get to know your professors.
Another thing about the research is that there's not only just professors involved, there's also grad students involved in research. And in my ACD research, there was a master's student, and like in kids team with Jason, there's a bunch of like PhD students there. And if you're like interested in what they do, or you need like other connections, like, this is also funny. My TA for Info 300 with Jason is also Jason's PhD student, so we do kids team together. So that's like another thing that like, and she's actually gonna like help me like with my project as well, because like she's also involved in kids team. And so that's like a whole another connection like with the grad student that you can have. So just if you're interested in, even if you're just like interested in grad school, you can talk to these grad students. So, and just even you're working with grad students too, and getting a good idea of like what they're getting their PhD on as well.
There are 6 minutes left in the class. Can we pause and see if there are any questions in the audience?
Study abroad, what's the language requirement?
Okay, so the question was, for study abroad, what are some language requirements, if any?
Depends on the program. If you look on the UW study abroad database, it says very clearly if there's any language requirements, and you can also filter depending on the language requirements, which is what I did. There's not a ton of full quarter programs, at least during the school year, that don't have language requirements. Mine was the only one fall quarter, I think, that was going to Europe at least, that didn't have any language requirements. But there are a lot of opportunities if you don't speak another language. You're just gonna have to learn a little bit of that language once you're there, unless you're in a country that speaks English, which there isn't a ton of. And those also aren't the most fun countries to go to because there's not that barrier. I think it's more interesting to go somewhere where you really have to work hard to get to know people. Like if I were to go to London for 6 weeks to go like understand the culture, like it's not going to feel as different of a culture to me because I'm not being pushed as far outside of my comfort zone because there's no language barrier. I understand what they're saying to me unless they're using like slang. And it's just, I think making those connections with people, even when you can't fully communicate with them, is really cool and really fun and interesting and important.
Yeah. If you're interested in studying abroad in a different culture, but don't want to like take on a prereq language class before you go, you might consider English-speaking countries in Asia, like Singapore or Hong Kong, as an alternative. I am not Singaporean, but I did live and work for 3 years in Singapore right before I moved to Seattle. And it was fascinating. They have 4 official languages there. They have 1 official language, but 4 languages that are spoken very commonly. Whoa, that's weird. Outside of English. So officially, all the schoolwork and professional work environments will be in English, but you'll notice pockets of people will speak, dialects of Chinese or dialects of Hindi or other languages. So I didn't know any of those languages before I went there, but I picked up a little bit of the colloquial languages here and there, and I found that to be extremely fascinating and fun. And I whip it out sometimes with like friends here, and they're like, they're so amazed that I know like broken Mandarin Chinese. But that's a good like middle ground if you want to be culturally immersed in a pretty different place without having to like do a lot of prep work before you go.
Same with Europe. I mean, a lot of them speak different languages, but most every country, everybody's very fluent in English.
My area in Spain, most Spanish people don't speak fluent English. And I did a high school program in France. Most older people in France don't speak English as well, except for in Paris. In my area of Spain, there were not very many people who spoke English. It was on, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this, but it was on St. James Way, or it's a pilgrimage across Spain to a holy city. It's Santiago de Compostela. And so it was a big stop on that pilgrimage. So all the service employees spoke at least enough English to kind of do their jobs. So you could go to a restaurant and order in English and they'd be able to understand it, but you could not have full conversations with people, which is something that you don't expect out of a country like Spain. You go to Spain and you expect people are going to speak English, but even in Madrid, people did not speak English. You were going to have to speak Spanish with them or find some other way to communicate with them.
Yeah.
I think we have one more question.
Oh,
do we have time?
Yeah, we can take that last question and then we'll just do one like last final words from the panelists. If you have any final words, so we'll end there. Yep, we'll take that one last question from the audience.
Did you hear that?
No. What was the question?
Okay, let me just send this. How, if you are to, how would you use your experiences through research and apply them? Like how do you plan to apply them, if at all? to out, like once you graduate, like in work, graduate school, etc.
Well, I'll start. So I'm gonna kind of apply it both ways. So with industry jobs, I'm gonna spin my research experience like, I was able to find a project that I fit with. I found a professor I fit with, and I was able to work with them to create, strategic goals to, build a product or something like that. Just inject a bunch of like industry language into what I was doing and kind of make it sound like that. And then for grad school applications, I'm going to play up more of like the research, thesis design, research methods, learning to apply for grants, NRIB, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm applying to both paths, and just depending on which path I'm going for, I'm going to tailor how I talk about that experience.
For me, I'm actually sort of similar to Liam's, where it's like I'm considering both industry and grad school. I definitely want to do a master's degree, just because like I want to expand sort of like the HCI side of things that I learned in the high school. Because the high school you learn like everything, and like HCI is just like a focus. Whereas like in my master's degree, I want to learn like everything HCI. But what's great is that I'm good with like I can do UX research in industry if I wanted to. I am sort of, this has actually got me considering a PhD side of things, because I like to do research, but I also like to teach because I teach a lot. So I feel like that could also go, for me, could go both ways. Whether it's, so definitely get a master's degree, but then it's like industry or PhD. So we'll see how that goes.
I did data science on my team, so I like worked with a lot of data and such. So I could apply those skills that I learned from doing that research to both applying to a master's degree or taking a job, as they're both very applicable. I love research, so I could definitely see myself going on, but I have a couple years too. So.
Well, I think we have officially crossed the 20-minute mark, so I want to be mindful of the panelists' time and the students' time. Thank you so much for coming and sharing about your experiences with us. I did leave the panelists' email addresses on the initial slide if you have follow-up questions. I'm sorry I didn't ask you for permission, but I just assumed.
Go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, all. We will, the class, we will meet again next week, I think focusing on graduate school. And actually it'll be a lot of fun because I've invited some alumni to participate in that session via Zoom. So it will be fun, and I'll communicate any special factors in advance. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, Naomi.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.